for joining us. I recognize some of you from my session yesterday on green energy, and we're going to cover a few of the same topics, but from a really different angle. I think the first thing to get clear on is why are cities so important? As has really been bouncing around for the last year, more than half of human beings now live in cities. Kind of one of these mega trends that has been going on for so long that we can't really see it stopping. Cities are kind of in the long scheme of human history are kind of the defining product of our civilization. They live longer than any other human creation, and they tend to structure people's lives in ways that change not only how they live, but how they think. One thing we know is that our cities are going to face major challenges as we try and transform our energy system from heavily fossil fuel based to whatever comes after that. And we also know that more and more people in every part of the world are going to be using more and more energy. So these two trends are basically colliding. We are trying to make a wrenching change to our energy system just as we're ramping up needing more energy in other places. So what's the solution to this problem? Because really, we're going to have major problems in every part of the world, not just in New York City, India, China, Brazil, Russia, basically everywhere. Part of the answer, I think, is going to be data, getting smarter about the way that we use resources within cities. And really what we need to do is use a lot of the data mining techniques that we're developing at Google, at Amazon, all the ways that we're getting smart about using massive amounts of data to recommend basically stuff for you to buy. We need to transform all of that intellectual infrastructure into making cities smarter, not just getting you to buy more books from Amazon. For that reason, I'm really glad to welcome Chandrakant Patel. He is the head of the Sustainable Ecosystems Program for HP Labs. And he's really a pioneer in data center efficiency. Data centers, as you know, you get all these computers in a room, and they start using massive amounts of energy. They need lots of cooling. And he really has been a leader in figuring out how you do that. He's also an inveterate sketcher, as you're going to see, not just from the whiteboard. He did that in about 10 seconds, but also sketching out visions of what the future of the city might really look like. One thing we do know is that every time we layer a new information network on top of a city's other grids, the water grid, the transportation grid, the way it gets energy, the city changes. When we put telephones and other types of radio transmitters into cities, it made it more exciting to live out in the suburbs than it was in the middle of the city. And an energy historian, David Nye, once said that cars might have made it possible to get to the suburbs, but it was television and the radio that made it desirable to live there. And so I think we're going to see really similar and massive changes in the form of cities as we start getting and layering more data on top of them. Chandrakant, why don't you come up? He's going to have a presentation for about 30 minutes on the city of tomorrow.
Thank you. So I'm delighted to be here. Good morning to you. And I'm one of those guys who likes to defend his thesis. So I've loved dissenting viewpoint. And in my talk today, I will paint a picture of city of tomorrow, but with keeping in mind that whenever we talk about city of tomorrow, we conjure up images of a Jetsons age. But I would like to bring you down to what I call the utopian reality. As was introduced earlier, we have a lot of constraints. We have infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. We have a great deal of work ahead for us. But what we do is we lack an integrated supply-demand approach. We don't have a holistic framework within which we can approach cities of tomorrow and develop solutions. So what I will present to you is a framework based on supply and demand. And I believe, given that I am from an IT company, I believe that IT can play a big role, data can play a big role in enabling cities of tomorrow. And so, if you, that would be a good area to dissent. But I hope to kind of present you this architecture today. And we have left enough room for a great deal of questions at the end. So we are motivated, obviously, by global population increase. A lot has been talked about. But I don't hear a lot being talked about externalities. So when I built my research team, I had an economist on my team as part of the sustainability research team to look at externalities, things people do for their benefit but end up becoming either a positive or a negative thing. And we are today, if we were to take the externalities that we are facing today, and we've had to account for it, what will happen to the cost of goods we are consuming is a big concern of ours. And when is that inflection coming? So externalities such as wars that we are seeing today. A classic example is the externality associated with the natural disaster and having 10% of electricity gone from the grid and putting the whole nuclear future in question. So one of the things I've asked my team to look at is, in light of these externalities, what is the true cost? All the havoc that we are causing to the environment, we'll have to pay for it sometimes. Either regulations will be imposed, and we will have to somehow account for it. So in light of sustainability, what ought to be the strategy is a key question to think about. The second thing to look for is, today sustainability is rife with anecdotes. Usually a compliance time action. People build a product, reduce the power, plant a tree, and call it green. It's a good action, but not holistic enough. So we must think at design time. So my daughter is learning to be a mechanical engineer. In addition to do geometric design and stress analysis, I want her to look at the entire supply chain and answer those questions in light of sustainability. What ought to be the supply chain? Are we going to face with mineral shortages? Are there going to be geopolitical issues? How do we do a least joules design? Joules of energy is the currency in my mind. So we need a framework that does efficient provisioning of supply side resources, minerals, various energy sources, and we must manage the demand so that we do integrated supply demand management. So that's the thesis, and I'll show you the technical approach we are taking. I will show you by examples how it has been applied, and then I'll show you how we ought to apply it in the city of tomorrow. So the sketch I have for the city of tomorrow is one in which we have what I call the available energy bus. You will constantly hear me talk about available energy. It's from second law of thermodynamics, exergy, energy that is useful. So think of it this way. Diesel has a great deal of available energy. Petrol has a great deal of available energy. Once we burn it, that availability is destroyed. We are going to have to wait for dinosaurs to come back. So that to me is a good measure. By the same token, when the diesel is burnt in a vehicle, there are waste products. So energy was conserved from first law. The energy in diesel has now gone into propulsion of the car, and it's gone into these waste products. There is a lot of energy in the waste stream. We need a framework by which we look at energy in the waste stream. So a great example is the hybrid drive, which does regenerative braking, increases the life of your brake pads, and takes the energy back into the battery. So we need to look at the energy in the waste streams just as the energy that is available from raw material. That's the supply side bus. Then there is the IT bus, and I love the IT bus. Billions of handheld devices. I presume there'll be WebOS devices. Gary has his way. Thousands of data centers, millions of web-connected printers, and thousands of digital print factories. That's the IT bus. How do we seamlessly integrate this IT bus into the city of tomorrow so that we provide useful services that reduce the consumption of available energy? So picture an hourglass. The sand on the top is a pool of available energy. We are continually using it up. Can the IT bus, which is in the middle, throttle the hourglass so that we leave the available energy for future generation to have the same quality of life as we did? That definition might conjure up an image. So these are useful services in my mind. We've done a lot of frivolous activity on the internet. It's time we use that data to do something useful. So how do we build useful services that throttle the consumption of available energy? That's first. How do we deconstruct conventional business models, replace them with useful business models based on IT so that we conserve the pool of available energy? How do we seamlessly integrate IT into cities of tomorrow through measurement, communication, and computation so that we can extend the life of existing infrastructure? In my city, I will be checking the compressor, the pump, and say, Mr. Compressor, how are you doing today? In the old days, we mined the data. We mined your data to separate you from your money. Where are you going today? What are you going to buy today? By the way, you should do this, you should do that. Great, no problem. Let's use data mining to say, Mr. Pump, how are you doing? When are you going to fail? When are we going to have a leakage in the piping system? We don't have money to put another pipe system. We need to make things last longer. So in other words, data can be used, billions of points, to do analytics and control to run our efficient infrastructure more efficiently. So I'll present an architecture for that. So let's start with a couple of examples. We can't think of cities in the US or anywhere else without thinking about the fundamental needs of the masses. So I would like to give you an example to be somewhat global. The first is the IT services. That man, it's not very clear because of the light. That man here comes to sell vegetables at my house in India, in Baroda. I am a vegetarian. I'm a connoisseur of vegetables. Indeed, I call him and I say, do you have eggplant, Japanese eggplant, Chinese eggplant, the local language? And the man tells me what he has. I asked him, how can he use IT better? He's competing against the big box stores. His box is that cart. That's all the vegetables he can carry. He tells me, and by the way, he doesn't have refrigerated home, so he cannot afford any waste. He needs to improve his supply chain. He needs to get your pre-order so he can carry the right amount of things to the right people. And he would, by the way, like an IT service. And then he wants IT service. He says, well, you get your train reservations done from San Francisco. Why can't I use my cell phone to get IT done? He has SMS access. He doesn't have the full IT access. That's a tragedy. 800 million who can use IT not to watch Bollywood on their cell phone, but to do something useful, and they can't access it. Do you know why they can't access it? Because the IT service that he wants is at $1 a month. He's willing to pay $50 for his handheld device. That we can manage. So the on-ramp is the handheld device. What is the processing center? The processing center is that data center in the back. Consumes. And do you know why we can't give him a service at $1 a month? The energy consumed in the data center is so high, and everything is on. There are systems that are on all the time, that it becomes cost prohibitive to go down to that price point. So we need to take a different look to see how do we build IT services that get everybody on board. Everybody on means the 700 million included. The interesting thing is, contrary to the oft-held opinion that sustainability is all about paying more, it turns out that if you did least energy, least material design for IT equipment, from handheld to data center, you will go to the lowest cost. So sustainability is not about paying more. It's about paying less. Least energy, least material is a no-brainer. It's a low cost. So we have to build systems with a framework that enable us least material, least energy design, and thereby save us money. Second is use IT to what I call need-based provisioning of resources. Use sensing and control to manage resources so that you get what you want when you need it. I like to give an example. My service level agreement with my life is to drive Lamborghini for 15 minutes. So I think that can easily be. That service level agreement can be met. The city has a place where I can rent it for 15 minutes. So given a pool of resources and given your service level agreement, what can I give you things when you want it? And so we meet all your requirements and don't have to have over provisioning in the city. That's one way to look at it. One thing I do want to talk about that's very interesting is those rickshaws. You might be thinking, why are they lined up? It brings tears to my eyes when I see those rickshaw guys lined up all night long, not with their family, but at the queue at the compressed natural gas station. Do you know why they're there? Because there was an externality. The air was polluted in my city. We couldn't breathe, so we mandated compressed natural gas. There are 2 filling stations, and the guys have to stay up all night, sleep in the rickshaw to get the fill of a CNG. To me, I'm thinking, this is a tragedy. An externality became a burden for the rickshaw guy. I hope the rickshaw person passes that cost along to us. But can we solve that problem so that he does not have to pass the cost along for us? What can we do? Can we use GPS, IT, and schedule his filling? Come on, in this day and age, should he be standing in the queue? Can't we have an app for that? Instead of an app, like, he doesn't want to listen to music, Gary. So I think there is an opportunity to create lots of interesting things. So what happens, the vision I have, is it's these IT data centers at the core, be the information processing center. You heard a lot about cloud. So imagine that's a cloud data center. But in order to have that data center provide services at the right price point, it needs to be sustainable. So it's a sustainable data center, and it serves an ecosystem of clients. from that vegetable vendor to the water system to the transport system. But we need a framework. We need a technical framework that will enable us to do that. And go back to that sketch I said, the pool of available energy. And think of what and another thing I would like to point out to you is when I picked up the issue of the Atlantic July issue, idea number 14 happens to be the green revolution is neither. That's what it says. What it says is, since 1997, our hydroelectric output has dropped by a third. Doesn't surprise me. My kids can't build hydroelectric power plants. They can do all kinds of things on the internet, but we haven't trained them hands-on skills to build some of these things. So the hydroelectric power has dropped by a third, and the article contends that wind and other renewables have pretty much filled that gap. So, and then an externality has happened because of Japan. So in this context, and I agree with this, in this context you can't just look at the demand side, you must look at the supply side. So what do we do from supply side? So if there is anything you take away today, this is one thing you should take away. On the supply side, principle number 1, life cycle design. How much energy was required to make this product from end to end, manufacturing, extraction, operation, and reclamation. Second, use local resources of available energy. On the supply side, how can we use local energy in the environment? From second law, we can look at availability that exists. For example, in the city where I live, 30 million gallons of wastewater makes it to the sewage treatment plant. Out of that, they generate methane, and there is 700 kilowatt output. I think there is 2 megawatts that we can still use. The rest is flared up. We have lots of availability in waste, in the waste stream. So availability is not just about looking at available energy in the wind, the sun, the hydroelectric power plants, but it also is about looking at availability in waste. So we need a framework for that. So supply side is local sources of available energy, including examination of energy in the waste, available energy used across the life cycle, and on the demand side, provisioning the available energy based on your needs. Give you what you want, when you want it, no more, no less. Use sensing and control to do that. So just to kind of be clear on available energy, think of an electric car. We think about electric cars as saving us, the green revolution. But don't think of the electric car by itself. You have to go back to look at where did the energy come from. The available energy, the potential energy in the water, in the hydroelectric plant, once it dropped, that potential energy was destroyed. That energy was carried all the way to, and there was destruction of available energy all the way to the car. And then there was propulsion in the car, and then there are waste streams. Some of the waste stream is being used for hybrid drive, as an example. So this is the kind of the kind of basic understanding. Another example to think about availability is oftentimes we think of heat as having available energy. 1 joule at about 50 degrees Celsius has about 0.07 joules of available energy, theoretically maximum available. Not a whole lot of available energy. But 1 joule at 500 degrees Celsius, you know those flue gases coming out of power plants have 0.6 joules that's available. So when you are going by process plants, you go by chemical plants, you've got to look at, oh, there's got to be a lot of availability here. What can I do with this availability? So the first principle, once again, and I'll quickly go through this, life cycle design. And in this context, I think whatever we design, whether it's cities or products, we should have a way to have a design time approach so that I would look at iron ore came from India, I manufactured in China, used it in Aspen, dispose it somewhere else. Alternative could be molybdenum came from Colorado, manufactured in Fort Collins, used in Aspen. Let joules be the decider, not labor arbitrage. If sustainability ought to be in our strategy, what is the least joules design? By the way, people have joules as well, and they are the most important joules. I can't draw people very well, so those are people. So people have joules by virtue of learning. And I'll end with that, the human factors element. The second principle, like I said, is use of local sources of available energy. And I'll give you an example. This should crystallize what I mean by that. This man who comes to sell vegetables to me, he doesn't have electricity at home. Does he care if his data center is on 24/7? He doesn't. But yet we design data centers with on all the time, lots of redundancy. Can I take his job and queue the job up until the sun comes out? Sure, I can. So the idea is, if I'm servicing him, build something that gives him what he wants based on his service level agreement. Let's all have service level agreements, and let's give people what they want based on their service level agreement. So if I applied the supply demand framework, this is what it would look like. There's a data center. It has multiple sources of power. It has wind, solar, biogas, geo, and this is a microgrid. So instead of thinking about getting power from long distances, think of microgrids of local resources. So if you were going to build the city of tomorrow, can we think of local resource microgrids, including energy from the wastewater treatment plant, and have a complete supply side strategy of where the energy is coming from? And so in this case, that's the kind, if we build a data center like that, and shape the demand in the data center. So the idea is we shape it so that we are net zero. That gets us to the price point that he can board, the IT bus. And so what would it look like? So here's an example what I would like a data center to look like. This is a data center, sorry. Oh. So the way I would design it, this is a data center. It's located at a dairy farm. By the way, a US dairy cow produces 55 kilograms of manure a day. Very prolific. 1,200 dairy cows generate about, I went to a dairy farm near my house. 1,200 dairy cows this man had, 500 kilowatts of electricity. So what happens is, there's a dairy cow. I strategically drew it because I can't draw cows very well either. And there is the manure. It goes into a digester. And the digester needs to be kept warm to generate methane. So where does the heat for that come from? What would be an ideal waste heat to use? It's the IT equipment. For this, it's the IT equipment. The IT equipment has heat coming out at very low grade, 45 degrees Celsius. We send it out, right? Have the hot water from the IT equipment go and enhance methanation. The methane goes and runs an electric generator, and there's a lot of waste heat from the electric generator. Very high grade, high temperature. What do you do with that? Use that to run an absorption refrigeration cycle to cool the data center. So what I'm saying is these synergies exist where the waste of one can be used in the waste of other, and the waste from, say, IT is used by the waste in this case. So exploiting the synergies is critical in this microgrid approach. I call this a symbiotic relationship between IT and manure. It's it's tongue in cheek, but it kind of gets the point that when we build microgrids, we need to think not only about the source of power, but also the waste stream, hence the available energy formulation. So in the city of tomorrow, I envisage a data center in the middle, running on a microgrid, providing services based on your SLA and providing useful services, and all the elements of the city, the key verticals. What are the verticals in the city? Power, water, waste, transport. They are built as microgrids. So if Aspen had to consider a supply side source, it would be an interesting study for Aspen 2.0 to see what is available in this environment and what would a microgrid look like. A microgrid of water, a microgrid of transport, all the data goes in and is analyzed and is acted upon. So a day in the life of this city, for me, is, once again, it's a utopian reality. For the last 20 years, I've been on a bus in Palo Alto, from Fremont to Palo Alto. The bus has today Wi-Fi. It has a GPS locator on it. And it comes at a fixed time. It has 2 spots for a bicycle rack. So as you know, in most of these places, the buses run empty. Part of the problem is the last mile problem. For example, I would like to take the bike to the bus, but I don't know if there's a spot on the bus for me. There's something wrong with this picture, right? Secondly, today I can locate the bus, but it seems like today's system of running the bus is archaic. So if my big bet was that in the city of tomorrow, how do I make the local transit system profitable? You know what I would do? I would say, let's use what you have. You don't have money to buy any more buses. That's given. So the infrastructure is limited. But you do have GPS, you got Wi-Fi. Can you consider dynamic scheduling of buses? Dynamic routing of buses. Why does it have to stay the same route? And dynamic pricing. You should see in my area when there is a spare the air day and the bus is free, it's full. So why not have market-based pricing on the bus as well? So a day in the life for me is enabling in existing cities, because we already have lots of cities which are, everything is on and everybody is on. So everything is connected, gadgets are connected. Use data to use existing microgrid of transport to enable that. So more efficient use. In my home, I have challenged my team. You've got what you got. The local utility has put a smart meter at the front. All I want is a single box ideal. I only want to buy one cell phone. It is my gateway. It's my gateway to access the smart meter data and give me insights so I can manage the home from a supply-demand perspective. So in the home, what we need to evolve are solutions that can use the smart meter that's already out there to give you insights. The problem with smart meter today is you get information, it's often late. It's not real time. So how do we disaggregate the information from the waveform to give you information today? So a day in the life is as simple as using what we have got to start using energy better in the. Similarly with electric vehicles. If you think electric vehicles are going to be successful in the Bay Area, the key thing that has to happen is not only the charging location, but the ability to find out how much you had to pay at various charging locations with the limited range. So can we use the IT bus so that when you come home, a printer gives you the printout of wherever you charged all day, and that's your bill. I'll be getting charged by Palo Alto, San Francisco, multiple places. So we need to build an ecosystem that provides services such as billing services. So some of these basic things need to happen in existing cities. We have a utopian reality where we got to do what we have with what we have. And so this is a day in the life immediately, what I would call, say, tomorrow. But what about day after? If somebody told me that we are going to architect the city of tomorrow, then that's a different point of view. This is the vision I have. And if you take away anything from this talk, I hope I can convince you that these horizontals and verticals are all you need in the city. So let me explain what they are. A given city has multiple verticals: power, transport, water, waste. And for brevity, I don't show the rest. My suggestion is all these verticals should have these horizontals striping across it. So if we were to design a city of tomorrow, we should employ traditional ecological engineering. When I go to Washington, I look at the National Archives. When I go to a site in India, like the Jain temples in Girnar, I found out that it's in an arid region. They had to think of the supply, which was the rainwater, and they used microgrids of local supplies to build the city of tomorrow. There's a lot of information. They have an intricate water harvesting system. In Amber Palace, for example, in Rajasthan. Next time you go to Jaipur, have them open the hatch. The entire bottom of that fort is a reservoir, and it's in an arid region. So there is a lot we can learn from traditional ecological engineering. Life cycle design. If we are going to do design work, use that framework to look at available energy and the supply chain. So anything we do must have a life cycle joules footprint associated with it, and it should be a design time definition. Resource microgrids. Let's not think of cities with large-scale power plants everywhere. Let's look at microgrids of local resources. Microgrid of water. In the city where I live, we get water from Hetch Hetchy, we use groundwater, and we use San Joaquin Delta water. If we had to design a water system for Los Angeles, today it relies a lot on Northern California, what would be a new approach from a microgrid point of view? And the microgrid may have a desalination plant, given the locality. So we need to think of microgrids. Microgrid of power, microgrid of transport. And what's a microgrid of transport? A bicycle, a scooter, maybe a Zeppelin in the city of. I have a picture that I'm going across the Dumbarton Bridge in a Zeppelin. If it gets me, when we think of transport, let's not think about sleek high-speed trains. Think about the entire end-to-end journey. The first leg is by bicycle, the second leg is by a rickshaw, the third leg is by a high-speed. If we just build a high-speed train from Bakersfield to Los Angeles, I can guarantee you there'll be 3 locomotives pulling 3 bogies with 3 people. Gross over-provisioning, and we blew the money. We got to think holistically. So think of microgrids and how they'll be used. And how do we do that? What if we use pervasive sensing? Sensors everywhere. Indeed, there are sensors everywhere today. We are getting a lot of data. We are just not analyzing it. We are not data mining what things are important. We are data mining your buying patterns. That's great, but let's start data mining the operational pattern of a compressor so we can run it more efficiently. And I'll give you an example. We built a large site in Bangalore. If we put all water-cooled chillers to cool the buildings, we would save a lot in electricity. But water-cooled chillers use 18,000 gallons of water a day because of the water vaporizing through the cooling tower, which would be a big problem here, right, in an arid region. A lot of loss of water. So a holistic perspective was use air-cooled chillers and water-cooled chillers so that you can balance. And by the way, there is dispute for water in that region. So a holistic perspective is this a microgrid of cooling towers, which is air and water cooled. And what we did was we mined the data from 8,000 sensors for 6 months, billion points, and we determined the patterns. It's called motif mining. It's similar to looking at other kinds of patterns. Based on those patterns, we decided how to switch all those chillers and get the same efficiency we would have otherwise got. So in other words, there's a lot of efficiency that we are not getting because we are not looking from a fundamental standpoint deep enough using analytics. And then finally, in a utopian city, we would have policy-based control. So based on what you want to do that day, the IT infrastructure would have gathered the information and it would have provisioned all your resources for that day automatically. And that would be a dynamic control system. I'm a big proponent of dynamic control system. I wish I was 20 years younger. The exciting times lie ahead. And the control system will be done because there is a payback. Not because we want to live in a Jetsons-like city. It's because we will have all these externalities and constraints, and the control system will be there so we can preserve our resources. So a microgrid of water would look something like this. This is in my city. I would be using the wastewater and energy from wastewater. I would be using, this is again traditional engineering. This is nothing fancy. I'm using gray water for irrigation. All the things we've been doing. The only difference is I have put a sensing layer, I have a knowledge discovery layer, and a control layer. So I can sequence the pumps properly, run them more efficiently. So what we are saying is, the city of tomorrow doesn't need some massive engineering breakthroughs. There is traditional knowledge in engineering. We just need to get data to manage the resources better. And I won't get into this. This is a whole bit on how do we do data analytics. In the interest of time, I will not. I'm hoping that we will have more questions. So Alexis, I'll continue to move on. The idea being that all these billions of points that are being generated, think about data mining, right? If I had to mine data of your buying patterns, I can hire people who can just look at the patterns and do something. But in the city of tomorrow, I'll have to do analytics on physical systems, compressors and pumps. So the person I need to hire is a mechanical engineer with a computer science degree. It's a new world. In this data mining, you need people with old school engineering knowledge. So the future of the city is one where joules of available energy is the currency. Available energy, energy that is useful, approximately 35 megajoules per liter in diesel. So when I see a piece of wood lying around and I'm walking in my home in India and I saw this poor person carrying this piece of wood collected to cook in the evening, I say, that looks like about 10 kilograms at 10 megajoules per kilogram. That's 100, she's carrying 100 megajoules on her head. So to me, everything is, currency is joules. When we designed our laptop, for example, this laptop, it is destroys 300 kilograms of coal in its lifetime, 9 megajoules. When my kids do frivolous activity on the internet, I say, how much joules of available energy did you destroy today? So the currency in the metric in my world is activity, services done per unit of joules destroyed. I say destroyed, they're not coming back again. So life cycle approach, joules of available energy to design our infrastructure, IT infrastructure where everybody is on, everything is on. It's a world where we are getting data and we are provisioning resources based on the need. So in summary, what I have provided you is a supply-demand perspective. What I've said is we want to build cities of tomorrow, but we need to start from a fundamentals point of view to understand, have a framework that we utilize, not make narrow decision. Needs a holistic approach based on supply and demand. And that's the use of available energy, the supply side principle and the demand side principle. Supply side being life cycle design, local use of available energy, demand side meaning provision the pool of resources based on your need, no more, no less. Don't give people any lectures on what kind of car they bought. Just devise a system that people can do what they want when they want it. That's my vision. In order to get there, we can leverage a rich existing portfolio of technology. We have a huge technology base. So when I go to Washington, I'm saying, let's not look for the silver bullet for the next energy conversion means. We already have everything. You look at energy conversion means from 100 years ago, 50 years ago, we have hardly utilized all of them. So we need to use our existing portfolio of technology. We need a systemic perspective. So what you just heard from me was a systemic perspective. Look across the entire system. The biggest challenge in doing systemic innovation is human capital trained in the fundamentals. I am concerned that we need old school knowledge, which is lacking. People have somehow got this misconception that all these whiz-bang things we are doing in IT without considering the metalworking, the woodworking, etc. I recently wrote an op-ed piece called Tinkering Our Way to Success. When I was a child growing up in India, I thought America was great because her children worked on their parents' cars. They built radio control planes. It was a naive perspective, but I don't believe it was naive. When my kid came to me saying, I'm going to take a computer class, I said, anybody can be a mouse jockey or thumb jockey, finger jockey. Who can do metalworking, woodworking? If joules is the currency and manufacturing is coming back, old school needs to come back. Second thing, the human capital must be multidisciplinary. So if we are going to do data mining, Mr. Pump, how are you doing? When are you going to fail? How efficiently are you operating? We need a mechanical engineer, a computer scientist, economist. And by the way, sustainability is working on the intersection of social, economic, and ecological. So we need to also worry about social innovations. So we need a multidisciplinary workforce. So if I was the president, my call to action is bring back the apprenticeship school. Let's get our human capital trained. In 10 years, everything is coming back. The only way it's not going to come back is if we don't have the human capital. And we are not working on the human capital. So the city of tomorrow needs people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandrakant. I want to draw a little bit of attention to three pieces of Chandrakant's talk, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. I think it's really interesting that visions of the future now, like the one that was presented here, aren't just futuristic anymore. They're incorporating pieces of the past, and sometimes deep past, as in traditional ecological engineering, into our visions of the future. The second is, I don't think Chandrakant actually expects all of you to start seeing pieces of wood as available energy in joules. However, there are a lot of visualization strategies that we're going to be able to take advantage of that will allow you to see a lot of what you do as joules without you having to actually do the calculations in your head. And the last thing I wanted to say, the power meter example that he gave is actually really fascinating. Imagine so you want to know all these things about how you're using electricity in your house. How much electricity is your refrigerator taking? How much are your lights taking, your computers? That's how you kind of develop an energy profile for yourself. Right now, you'd have to sort of plug in all sorts of different sensors in order to understand exactly what's going on. And what his team wants to do is take one signal, that is like your power meter, and use all of the available data coming in from that one source to create that profile automatically. Like that's actually, I've never seen it done, but it would be an amazing thing because it would reduce the cost of getting all that data about yourself. We have a very persistent question. Why don't we go right back there? Yeah. And I'm going to repeat your question just so you know.
Considering that you're proposing a microgrid that, that in essence is a city in itself and creates a city, what's the economic lot size? Have you calculated if you were to plow down some empty land
Right.
and build the kind of
Yeah, so the question was, these microgrids, how well do they scale? It's a much, if that's the right way of paraphrasing the question.
Exactly.
So how well do they scale? So today, for example,
How small do they scale?
how well, yeah, how small do they scale?
Yeah.
So that's a good question. You look at my home in India, it's running on a microgrid. It scales down to that home, it's a generator. That's all there is. Then there's no other source. Used to have my manure-driven biogas stuff, but it's fallen out of favor. The kids don't want to go stir the soup.
Is it your generator?
Pardon me?
Your generator?
My generator, local. So that's the local microgrid. It's a very small home level microgrid. And my father, in fact, told me the kids don't want to maintain it. What we think are a good size of a microgrid, because we've done some for data centers, which are about 10 megawatts, right? So if you look at, if you think of Aspen as the, say, I'm just going to get some numbers. Stanford University is probably roughly 50 megawatts, to give you a perspective. Aspen is probably of the same scale, right? So, and the 10 megawatt source that we are looking to use, and depends, so what I would look at is first, what's available in the waste streams. So if there is a wastewater treatment plant, and I could situate a generator there, that's one option. So that's part of the microgrid, but it's a distributed microgrid. It's not building on a single piece of land. So I'll get electricity from there, and every rooftop is a microgrid. So it's taking local generation, combining it with generation at the wastewater treatment plant, and then some land for wind turbines as an example. It's not in one locality. So let me be clear when I talk about microgrids. It's an excellent question for clarification. It's distributed energy sources, but it's very challenging. When you have this supply side with variable supply side, and I didn't get into this, where wind is like that, sun is like this, there is a base load needed, and that's why I like the waste from methane, which is very flat. Then to shape the demand and manage that supply-demand management, that's what smart grid is all about. So the big challenge is going to be, how do you do the management of the smart grid in light of these distributed sources and keep it balanced?
Chandrakant.
As an example, when I was in Mumbai,
Right.
I met with a guy who was a big guy and wanted to build new Mumbai.
Right.
He was-
Vashi.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to move old Mumbai
To new Mumbai.
and start with land at scratch.
Right.
That's easy to understand.
Right.
That you can build a grid to do that.
Right.
Very easy to understand.
Right.
And that's probably what they're doing.
Right.
But I'm asking the question, the person I'm sitting with is a real estate developer.
Right.
If he needed to build a new gated community
Right.
and wanted to put these
Sure.
microgrid features in, is there a downscale economic lot size
Right.
that makes sense to do this in his new community?
Yeah, so let's take that offline. There's another interesting article in Lavasa, which is another near Pune, where somebody is developing a small city. Exactly what your friend is also looking to develop. And in that context, it's not clear they have used microgrid. So what you're saying is, if you had to build one with, say, natural gas-powered fuel cell, plus some other sources, what does that design look like? That's what you're talking
He
about.
might call on already available local resources.
Correct. And the way I would think it, off the top of my head, is depending if it's a sunlit area, I would think of every roof as contributing to that community, in addition to other sources that are available, and I would need a base load source. You can't have these diurnal sources. And today you can't be islanded. You're still connected to the grid, but there will be a natural gas-powered option, like a fuel cell.
Chandrakant, we spent basically the entire 20th century making bigger and bigger power plants and connecting the grid more and more together into not microgrid, but sort of macro grid. What's wrong with big power plants? Why should we go to that?
Excellent question. The problem with large power plant is the over-provisioning, right? So take, for example, countries which have lots of wind capabilities. We also have wind in the east. You end up putting a huge wind farm there, but then you still need to transmit that electricity. And it becomes very difficult to put that infrastructure when we don't even do a lot of work. All the high-speed transmission, high voltage transmission work is being done in China. I can't even find an electrical engineer who does power work. So what becomes a big problem is we build this big power plant. We need to get the electricity to various localities. And this is so over-provisioned that this whole economics becomes screwy. And you see that the power plant starts to sell electricity